You know, every time I hear about racism, when see any aspect of our society, or anybody in our society that's denigrated because of their colour of their skin, where they live, sexuality, their sex, I feel horrified for them. I think that this is a scourge that is besetting our society and is becoming more and more evident as time goes by. Now, mainly because the constitutional change, the referendum and the voice to Parliament of Indigenous people has set a lot of this alight. That there have been, over the years, forever in fact, there's been some form of racial vilification done against any minority group. There was a time when, I think I might have mentioned this in another post, when I can remember when I was at school, if you were Italian or Greek, if you had a different coloured skin, you were denigrated, put down, made fun of. And I think even as a child, I might have done some of that because I was led into that by my peers. I didn't have the ability to think, it seems, in those younger ages, freely for myself, nor understand the impact that some of the things that we might have said to others impacted them. But as a society, we don't seem to have grown up. We don't seem to realise that the way we think determines how we act, and the way we act is often harmful to other people. And at some point we must come to a decision about understanding how our behaviour does affect others, or alternatively, we just don't give a shit. And I think the sad thing is that many of us don't. We don't care about what I might say to another person, whether it be on social media, directly to their face, even though direct to the face rarely happens because the people that think this stuff are cowards and don't come forward and say things directly to people. They use social media or messages or some other form of contact. And I think the time has come whereby, particularly from my perspective, where I'm going to do all that I can to confront racial abuse whenever I see it. And it appears that now we're seeing it more and more often. We're hearing about it through social media, and we're seeing it on television. And the Stan Grant episode, even though I can understand that there are people that, I guess, see Stan as perhaps not a very good presenter. They may criticise his style. They may criticise the way he asks questions, that he does interrupt from time to time. I get all of that. And it's fair enough. You know, the strange thing is, I don't see people criticising other people in the media for the way they necessarily behave. Sarah Ferguson, for example, you know, like, I'd hate to be interviewed by Sarah. My God, she'd come at you. If she doesn't like you, or if she thinks she's got something to say, or she wants to make a point, she'll come for you. And to me, to some extent, that seems okay. I mean, really, the idea of an interview is to be able to gather information from the interviewee that tells us about the issue, about who they are, how they think, why they think the way that they do, and to challenge their views. The job of a journalist is to report facts, to talk about the issues in a factual way, based on information they have gathered from sources that can be trusted and that are telling us or giving us the best information that they can. There is this line, though, that sits between a journalist giving facts, which you'll see on most most news items, I guess, news channels, there'll be someone who'll present a fact about an accident, about someone that's been assaulted, about a court process, about government type issues as well. So someone presents those facts as they're presented to them. They just regurgitate it. And then there's the other form of journalist who you see a lot of on Sky News. I don't know whether they're all journalists, but the likes of Paul Murray and Andrew Bolt and Chris Kenny and Rita, whatever her name is, Patani, they're opinion people. They express their opinion. Now, I believe there's a place somewhere for both of those people, for the person who wants to be able to present the facts, and then with those facts, they can present an opinion. We seem to focus a lot more on those people that present an opinion as opposed to those opinions sometimes being well informed by the facts. So when it comes to Stan, though, he has a reputation that goes back for decades about being a really good journalist. Now, perhaps not a lot of people know that because a lot of people wouldn't have been aware he worked with CNN and he travelled the world and he's done lots of interesting reporting over the years. He is a good journalist. There's no disputing any of that. Does he get into opinion pieces or his opinions? Well, if you're Indigenous and you're talking about something that relates directly to you, I think it's reasonable to expect that person who has an investment in that very issue to talk about the way that it's impacted them. We may argue that that's not necessarily journalism. Maybe that's something else. Maybe that's about an exploration of one's own experiences in relation to the topic that you're discussing. So is Stan best equipped to discuss that when it comes to Indigenous issues, and particularly when it comes to the colonisation of this country and the impact that colonisation still has on Indigenous people? Well, yes, it is. In my view, anyway, it is. But there are certain people, it seems, who resent that, who, for whatever reason, cannot differentiate between a person's personal involvement in an issue and the fact that they should be just a journalist reporting facts. Stan, I think, steps over that mark a lot because the issue that does concern him the most is how his people, First Nations people, have been treated and are being treated to this very day. And with the advent of the referendum, this has become an important issue for him. And I think he has the right to talk about those issues, whether it be about the coronation, whether about the voice to Parliament, whatever it might be. He has the right, because he has the heritage, to be able to talk about those issues. So why do people attack him? Well, probably because they're racist pricks. I don't know how to term it in any other way. They are ignorant, poorly educated, I reckon, in a way, out of touch individuals with what is actually happening in this country. And they have, a lot of these people, I reckon, have an underlying sense of their own privilege. And they fail to understand how that privilege has helped them to get to wherever they want. Or they're envious that someone else might be able to leapfrog them and get in front of them. Someone that they believe is lesser than them. So I wanted to play Stan's response to at the end of Q&A last night, because I think this is a heartfelt response, a considered response to what all of this has meant to him. And in doing so, he offers us something which we don't often see, I think, which is love and compassion for those who hate. He's a better man than I, because I can tell you now that if someone had a go at me, and particularly my family, I don't think there'd be much love there. But this is where he comes from. And he talks about it being a part of who his people are. And I think that's the important point to understand about Indigenous people, is that they aren't warlike. They aren't aggressive. They have a philosophy, an understanding and a connection that most of us would never understand. But there is Stan trying to help us to understand exactly what that is.
I'm stepping away for a little while. Sometimes we need to just take time out. Sometimes our souls are hurting, and so it is for me. I've had to learn that endurance is not always strength. Sometimes strength is knowing when to say stop. And to those who have sent messages of support, thank you so much. But I'll be okay. Please send that support and care to those of my people and all people who feel abandoned and alone, who are wondering whether they have a place in this country and who don't have my privileges. To those who have abused me and my family, I would just say, if your aim was to hurt me, well, you've succeeded. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I must have given you so much cause to hate me so much, to target me and my family, to make threats against me. I'm sorry. And that's what Yinyamarra means. It means that I'm not just responsible for what I do, but for what you do. It's not just a word. It is sacred. It is what it means to be Wiradjuri. It is the core of my being. It is respect. It is respect that comes from the earth we are born into, from God, Bayami. If I break that, I lose who I am. I am down right now. I am. But I'll get back up and you can come at me again and I'll meet you with the love of my people. My people can teach the world to love. As Martin Luther King Jr. said of his struggle, we will wear you down with our capacity to love. Don't mistake our love for weakness. It is our strength. We have never stopped loving and fighting for justice and truth, the hard truths to speak in our land. Yinyamarra Winangana means to live with respect in a world worth living in. And we in the media must ask if we are truly honouring a world worth living in. Too often, we are the poison in the bloodstream of our society. I fear the media does not have the love or the language to speak to the gentle spirits of our land. I'm not walking away for a while because of racism. We get that far too often. I'm not walking away because of social media hatred. I need a break from the media. I feel like I'm part of the problem. And I need to ask myself how or if we can do it better. To my people, I have always wanted to represent you with pride. I know I might disappoint you sometimes, but in my own little way, I've just wanted to make us seen. And I'm sorry that I can't do that for a little while. To my family, I love you. And to my mum and dad, Bavadu Wiradjuri, Gibi Diramatalinya Baju Wiradjuri, Mandangu. Good night.
There is this notion that Stan talks about, which I do struggle with, I must confess, and that is that we are responsible for someone else's behaviour. I think it's an interesting notion. I think everybody's responsible for their behaviour. I think people should be aware of the impact that their behaviour has on others, and they should care about that. But Stan seems to be saying that he has done something that has impacted people, for which he feels responsible. And it's an interesting idea that sometimes we say so. I mean, here today I'm talking about this issue with Stan and thinking, well, am I aggravating it? Will there be people that will come online and talk to me in ways which are denigrating and hurtful? And my answer to that is probably not. However, I do have some. I'm just trying to find it here. I do have some interesting statements, and that came across my YouTube channel when I posted about Grant the other day, and I'll just cite one of these for you so that you can see what I'm referring to. The first one is from Nuts2559, whoever you are. I like the way these people don't actually tell you who they are. Grant always seems to side with the Indigenous regardless of who is at fault. When he sides with Indigenous, I don't think this is about him highlighting who's at fault. So what is the fault that this person's talking about? I mean, that simple sentence tells us that this person here sees Indigenous people with deficits. I mean, I admit we all had deficits. I don't have a dispute with that. But I've never seen Stan talk about anything that was really about wanting to highlight someone's faults because of any description, whether they be white, black, or whatever. He just talks. So what is it? So the person here is saying that Indigenous people have faults, and Stan's not talking about those faults. That's because this person sees Indigenous people primarily as having deficits. He goes on to say, I can understand his allegiances. Well, he understands that because he's Indigenous, but that can draw hatred from those who know the truth. I don't know what the truth is here that he's talking about, but obviously he does. An unbiased, open approach by Grant would have greatly reduced the racism he and others may have suffered. And I find that's an interesting comment in itself, an unbiased, open approach by Grant. Well, I think this is what I was saying before. Grant, you can't have an unbiased approach if you feel the hurt and the pain that your people are feeling. That hurt and the pain is going to be dominant. It's the issues which Grant and his family, current family, his kids, his grandparents, his great-grandparents, his great-great-grandparents have been suffering. And that's been passed down. So how in the hell is he supposed to have this unbiased, open approach? I can't see how anybody, a human, can do that. But that's what this person is requesting. I would suggest that this particular person and a couple of other messages I've got here, which you can read in that video, Stan Grant and Racial Abuse, I titled it. Those people need to look inside their souls and work out where their abuse lies and to start to consider what they can start to do about addressing their own prejudices. This is a massive, massive problem that needs to be dealt with, and I'm going to keep focusing on it and probably getting more and more of these types of messages over time, but that's fine. I don't object to getting negative messages. It just tells me more about who you are than anything else. You're not going to change my perspective on any of this. But I do suggest that all of us consider, for the sake of our First Nations people, for the sake of our country, that we need to vote yes when it comes to the referendum later this year. Thanks everybody for being with me. Please subscribe. Send me an email if you'd like to. And just remember that it's important that you look after yourselves, think about others, and that you keep everybody in your circle safe. Take care. Bye.